A massive earthquake just devastated a country in South America. North Korea fired another missile right before military drills began, and new details reveal a secret operation to protect President Trump from an assassination threat. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. This is Corey, your personal English teacher here on YouTube, and this is Digestible News, your news in digestible English, where we'll teach intermediate level English with news stories from Korea and around the world. A quick note before we start. In our first read-through of this news story, these will be blank. There will be no explanation. It is entirely for listening practice and comprehension practice. Try to use context and use this as a source for listening practice, okay? All right, let's get started with the first story. Powerful earthquake strikes Western Colombia. A massive earthquake has struck Western Colombia, killing hundreds of people and leaving thousands more injured or missing. The magnitude 7.4 earthquake hit on Monday, with its epicenter in a remote, underdeveloped area west of the capital, Bogota. It is the strongest earthquake to hit Colombia in more than a century. The shaking was felt across a wide area of the country and even reached neighboring Ecuador and Panama. The hardest hit cities include Cali, Colombia's third largest city, along with Pereira and Manizales. Entire buildings collapsed, including sections of a hospital in Cali that housed the pediatric and newborn care units. As of this week, the death toll has climbed past 265 people, with more than 3,700 injured and over 4,000 people still reported missing. Rescue teams have been racing against time to pull survivors from the rubble, but the effort has been difficult. The region around the epicenter is remote and hard to reach, with many areas only accessible by boat or plane. Colombia's government has declared a national disaster and deployed soldiers to help with search and rescue operations. International leaders from the United States, Europe, and neighboring countries have pledged support and aid. Colombia's newly inaugurated president, who took office just days before the earthquake struck, has taken personal charge of the emergency response, touring affected areas and announcing economic relief for families who lost their homes. Now, try to tell me what this story was about in as simple words as possible. You can tell me in the comments, or you can just think about it and try to say it aloud. Take this time. If you're enjoying this video so far, take a second to subscribe. Hit like, leave a comment as well. I read all of them. It really helps the channel grow and lets us reach more people like you. All right, we're going to move on to our second story. North Korea fires another missile ahead of joint drills. North Korea has launched another ballistic missile, its second in less than a week, just days before South Korean and United States begin a major joint military exercise. According to South Korea's military, the missile was fired from the Wonsan area in on North Korea's east coast early Wednesday morning. It appeared to target an area in the East Sea more than 700 kilometers away, far from any populated coastline, before landing there. This marks North Korea's 11th ballistic missile launch of the year. The timing is seen as a clear message. The launch comes just before the start of Ulchi Freedom Shield, an 11-day joint training exercise between South Korea and the United States that focuses on defending against threats from the North. North Korea has a long history of denouncing these annual drills, as we all know, as rehearsals for an invasion, and it often responds with missile tests of its own. South Korean and American officials continue to describe the exercises as purely defensive. Experts who study North Korea say this pattern is nothing new, but it does show that Pyongyang is closely watching the drills and may consider further action if it feels necessary. The missile appears to fall within the range typically used for short-range ballistic missiles, and both South Korean and Japanese authorities are conducting a more detailed analysis of its exact specifications. Just one day before the launch, the United States and more than 40 other countries issued a joint statement calling on all nations to give advance notice before conducting ballistic missile tests, citing the risk of miscalculation. Okay, now try to summarize this article, what was said, and try to write it down, or like I said before, speak it aloud. All right? Then we're going to move into story 3. All right, story 3. New details reveal secret operation to protect Trump from Iran threat. New reporting has revealed the extraordinary lengths taken to protect President Trump last month after intelligence agencies detected a credible assassination threat from Iran during his visit to a NATO summit in Turkey. According to officials, American intelligence picked up a specific threat involving a surface-to-air missile aimed at whichever aircraft was carrying the president as he left the summit in Ankara. At the same time, someone near the summit location was reportedly spotted carrying a shoulder-fired missile. Perhaps most concerning to security officials was how precise the threat appeared. Iran reportedly knew exactly which hotel Trump was staying in, down to the specific floor. Faced with this information, security teams devised a secret plan just hours before Trump's scheduled departure. Trump publicly boarded the original Air Force One as usual, appearing in front of cameras as normal. But he was then secretly transferred to a different military aircraft, using a catering truck as cover. Without the knowledge of most of the traveling press or even some White House staff. The original Air Force One then flew out of Turkey as a decoy, still carrying several senior officials on board, though they were reportedly not told the full details of the threat. Trump later confirmed the operation himself, telling reporters that the Secret Service and military asked him to switch to a different plane for his safety, and that he agreed to their request. Officials say the entire operation was one of the most complex security decisions of his presidency so far. And of course, our comprehension, try to summarize this article just from listening. All right? Come back whenever you've finished. All right, now that you're back, let's take a little listening break and just have a little chat. Why not, Yeah, these days, the temperature has actually went down, right? If you're living in Seoul, at least. I heard down south it's still pretty bad, but I'm very relieved at the temperature change. How about you guys? Also, what do you think about the stories so far? I was surprised about the President Trump story. I was very surprised about that. I thought it would be interesting to talk about. And usually you see these kind of things in movies, but you don't hear about it too often. I'm sure it happens way, way, way more than what we hear about, of course. But it is always interesting to hear this kind of story when it's a recent event. Normally, you don't hear this until years later when it's declassified, meaning revealed to the public. It's no longer classified, declassified. Yeah. Also, how do you like the set? It's coming along slowly, and the new microphone. I hope it sounds okay. I'm trying to improve the experience for you guys, so it's more interesting to watch and more interesting to listen to. So please tell me what you think. I really do care. All right. Anyway, have a nice little chat there. And we're going to move into our next section. Now we've listened to all 3 stories, and we have a choice now to go back, listen to them again, and practice the audio over and over until we can understand it better, or keep watching. I'm going to go through each story piece by piece and dissect, to take apart, to examine each part so you can understand everything better. All right? We're going to start that part now. First story, powerful earthquake strikes Western Colombia. A massive earthquake has struck Western Colombia, killing hundreds of people and leaving thousands more injured or missing. To put it simply, there was a huge earthquake that hit Western Colombia, and hundreds of people have died. And there are thousands that are hurt or they're unaccounted for, unfindable. They have not been found yet. The magnitude 7.4 earthquake hit on Monday with its epicenter in a remote, underdeveloped area west of the capital, Bogota. 7.4 magnitude earthquake is really big, as we know, but magnitude is the measurement of how strong an earthquake is. So 7.4 is quite high. It happened on Monday. It was the center of the earthquake is far, far away in a poor area in the countryside, west of the capital city. It is the strongest earthquake to hit Colombia in more than a century. So the strongest earthquake in 100 years. Maybe over 100 years there was one, but in the past 100 years, there's not been a strong one, not like this. The shaking was felt across a wide area of the country and even reached neighboring Ecuador and Panama. The shaking of the earth was so strong it went across multiple countries. Ecuador and Panama both felt it. Very strong earthquake. The earthquake struck. Striking means to hit with a sudden force, whether it's by a fist or by a gun or by like the earthquake starting that point. A strike can also mean workers refusing to work as some protest. So there's two meanings here. Like to go on strike means to stop working. To strike something is to hit something directly, like with a punch or a baseball bat, etc. Hardest in Cali, Colombia's third largest city, along with Pereira and Manizales. So the earthquake caused the most damage in Cali, Pereira, and Manizales. That's the most damaged regions. Entire buildings collapsed, including sections of a hospital in Cali that housed the pediatric and newborn care units. So there were the buildings, the whole building, the entire building fell down, including parts of a hospital. This hospital did not all fall down, but parts of it did. Other buildings all fell down. Like many of them fell down entirely. But this hospital that treated children and newborn babies, that part of a hospital also fell down. As of this week, the death toll has climbed past 265 people, with more than 3,700 injured and over 4,000 people still reported missing. To put it simply, until now, 265 people have died from this earthquake, and over 3,700, we don't know exactly, but at least 3,700 are injured, and 4,000 people have not been found. That's not the injured people. So there's over 7,700 people injured or missing. Rescue means to save someone from a dangerous situation. Rescue team is a team that rescues people, so it saves people. Have been racing against time to pull survivors from the rubble, but the effort has been difficult. So a rescue team are working as fast as they can. They know when you say race the clock, what that means is as time goes on, it's more and more dangerous. So they need to go as fast as they can. They're racing like a car race. They're racing the clock. The clock is here. If it wins, people die. So they're going as fast as they can to save as many people as possible. The region around the epicenter is remote and hard to reach, with many areas only accessible by boat or plane. To put it simply, the area near the epicenter is the center spot, the very middle spot where the earthquake comes from. So the epicenter is very far away, and there's not roads or trains or things to get to that location. Most places, you need a boat or a plane only. So it's very difficult to get to the center of the earthquake. Colombia's government has declared a national disaster and deployed soldiers to help with search and rescue operations. So the government officially has called it a disaster. Before it was not, up until just as the news broke. Soldiers and things have went to help survivors. In Korea, we called it the heat wave a disaster because of the danger and the people that died. So it allowed the government to give more money and resources to the heat wave. In this earthquake, it's the same way. It's a disaster, so they released the services and money to help save these people. Okay. International leaders from the United States, Europe, and neighboring countries have pledged support and aid. So leaders from other countries have promised aid. Aid is to help someone. So aid has a couple of meanings. If you hear like lemonade, that's a different aid. That aid is a drink. But AID is to help someone. And it's also AIDS, AIDS, is a disease that you can get. Right. So those are different meanings. Leaders from other countries have promised to send help and support. So we'll see how that happens in the near future. And I'll keep you updated as well. Colombia's newly inaugurated president, who took office just days before the earthquake struck, has taken personal charge of the emergency response, touring affected areas and announcing economic relief for families who lost their homes. So Colombia's brand new president, inaugurate is a special word used only for leadership roles in modern governments. To be inaugurated is to officially become a government worker, especially a high-level government worker. Usually, but not only, used with presidents and like chancellors, things like this. So the new president who just started his job officially is personally going and helping the response team, the rescue team. He is visiting or touring damaged areas and promising financial help to families and to help rebuild their homes. Make sense? All right. Now that we've finished the explanation, go back, listen again, and see how much more you understand. If you don't, you can always listen to this section again or read the newspaper PDF in the comments down below. And when you get back, we'll go into story 2. All right, now that we're back, let's do our second story about North Korea firing a missile ahead of joint drills. Start with the first sentence. North Korea has launched another ballistic missile, its second in less than a week, just days before South Korea and the United States begin a major joint military exercise. Okay, it's a long sentence, but here we go. North Korea launched or fired another missile. Another, why another? Because they've done 2 this week. The second time in under a week is 2. The second within the past week is another way to say it. The second within the past week, 2 in less than 7 days. It's the same meaning, okay? This came right before South Korea and the US start a big joint military exercise together. So a military exercise or a military drill is practicing for war or practicing for some situation like missile launches or land invasion or whatever. In this case, America and Korea are starting a military exercise, and this missile launch came right before. According to South Korea's military, the missile was fired from the Wonsan area on North Korea's east coast early Wednesday morning. So simply, South Korea's intelligence or military said the Wonsan area was the location of the missile. And it launched from that location. It was fired from that location. And it happened on the East Coast, which is the Wonsan area, early on Wednesday. It says it appeared to target means to aim something at a specific place or person. But target can also be like a big, as a noun, it can be like a goal or something that you do strike. For example, we targeted a boat. The boat is the target. A target is also like a red circle. Like when you play darts, that's a target. So to target something is to aim at something and try to fire or throw or hit something with it. It can also be a goal. Like my target is to learn English really well. My goal is to learn English really well. This is the same meaning. You can use this in sales as well. Like our sales target is, 1 million units, something like that. Make sense? Their target was an area in the East Sea, more than 700 kilometers away, far from any populated coastline, before landing there. So simply, it seems that they were aiming at a spot in the East Sea, 700 kilometers away, and not near any towns or cities or anywhere with people. This marks North Korea's 11th ballistic missile launch this year. So this marks means we now noted, we've written down, we've noticed that North Korea has launched 11 missiles this year. In 2026, so far, 11 missiles. The timing is, of course, a clear message. This always happens. We've seen it many, many, many times living here in South Korea. We can guess North Korea needs to fire a missile to make a statement, right? The launch comes just before the start of Ulchi Freedom Shield. Ulchi Freedom Shield is the name of the drill that they're practicing. This is the exercise that South Korea and the United States are practicing. It's an 11-day joint training exercise between South Korea and the United States that focuses on what? Defending against threats from the North. So the intention, the public statement is Ulchi Shield, Freedom Shield rather, is a defensive exercise to prepare for attacks from North Korea. That's what is officially said. However, we don't know what North Korea really thinks, and we don't know exactly what the military drill is. North Korea has a long history of protesting. Protests means to show strong disagreement with some action. We'll see protests in Seoul a lot with like signs and recently at Jamsil there was protests about the voting. It's been going on since June. So this kind of protests where there's sit-ins, they don't eat, or they'll have a sign, or they'll do some speaking thing, or they'll do some action. This is a protest. These annual drills are rehearsals for an invasion, and it often responds with missile tests of its own. They're saying North Korea criticizes these yearly drills. They don't like them, obviously. We see it every year. And they say, these are not defensive drills. You are practicing to invade North Korea. That's always what is said. And usually they respond by doing what? Firing missiles. In my first few years in Korea, every time they fired a missile, this is a little inside Korea teacher's life. Every time they fired a missile, my family contacted me, and they knew about it before I did. They knew the missile launch before me, even though I lived here, because in America, it had a very big impact. Like, people were really worried about it. And when my family saw that the missile was launched and their son is in, South Korea, they got very worried. But us and people that live in Korea and Koreans, we know it's just a tantrum, usually. All right. Anyway, South Korean, and there's no political statement here. It's just, I'm just telling you my situation. South Korean and American officials continue to describe the exercise as purely defensive. So American and South Korean officials, government workers or military workers, are saying the exercise, the drill, is just defense. That's all. And they announced the drill ahead of time. They always do, according to United Nations regulations. Experts who study North Korea say this pattern is nothing new, but it does show that Pyongyang is closely watching the drills and may consider further action if it feels it is necessary. So experts on North Korea, usually professors or military experts, say, of course, this happens all the time. This happened many times before, but this is showing that North Korea is watching South Korea's drills and the United States military actions closely. It's paying close attention and might do more if it thinks it needs to. We know from every year that that's not the case so far. We'll see. The missile appears to fall within the range typically used for short-range, there we go, for short-range ballistic missiles, and both South Korea and Japanese authorities are conducting a further investigation. They're a more intense and detailed analysis of its exact specifications. So they have gone to the location where the missile was launched and where it landed, and they have retrieved what is there, and they're doing an analysis to get more details about the missile, the type of missile that it is, and its total range and its intention, if it had a payload being if it has something inside, like a payload is the something that they're sending somewhere. So a missile carries a payload. The payload can be a bomb, it can be people, it can be any number of things. When NASA fires a rocket into space, the payload is people or supplies, things like that. Just one day before the launch, the United States and more than 40 other countries issued a joint statement calling on all nations to give advance notice before conducting a ballistic missile tests, citing the risk of dangerous miscalculations. And so the day before they launched the missile, the United Nations and the U.S., well, not United Nations necessarily, but many United Nations countries, 40 of them, released a joint statement asking all countries to warn everybody before testing missiles, just in case there is some serious problem. We know even the best rocket launchers and the best missile launching devices and companies sometimes make mistakes. We saw many SpaceX missiles, or rather rockets, blow up before they made it off the launch pad. Not many, but more than one, right? And so it can happen. This is just them asking for advanced warning. All right. How did you do? I know that story is a little bit different than other stories we do. The missile launching stories from North Korea, we usually don't cover, as it is not news. Not news in that we see it a lot, right? But I thought there would be some interesting words and phrases, including payload and other things like that. Protest. So we'll do it this time. Or if there's a more interesting missile launch story in the future, we'll do that as well. But as always, this is an English language learning channel, not a news channel per se. So, of course, I want to find as many useful words and phrases for you guys as possible. Now go back and you can listen one more time and see if you understand better. Then we'll come back to story number 3. Okay, now that you are back, let's go to our third story. New details reveal secret operation to protect Trump from Iran threat. Here we go. New reporting has revealed. Reveal means to make known something that was previously hidden, to show, to tell, to unveil, to pull back the curtain. Something that was previously hidden. The extraordinary links taken to protect President Trump last month after intelligence agencies detect means to notice or to discover something, a credible assassination threat from Iran during his visit to a NATO summit in Turkey. So new reports have shown that some officials went really far and worked really hard to protect President Trump last month after they found out there was an assassination attempt or two, or maybe not an attempt because it didn't go, but there was a threat of multiple assassination possibilities during his trip to Turkey. Okay. According to officials, American intelligence picked up a specific threat involving a surface-to-air missile aimed at whichever aircraft was carrying the president as he left the summit in Ankara. So government officials, government workers say American intelligence found a specific threat. There was a missile aimed at the plane that the president was on as he flew off in Ankara. At the same time, someone near the summit location was reportedly spotted carrying a shoulder-fired missile. Basically, at the same time as the plane and the missile was aimed, someone else was seen, supposedly, allegedly, reportedly, we don't know for sure, but someone said they saw a missile launcher that's fired from the shoulder. Perhaps most concerning to security officials was how precise the threat appeared. The officials were worried because the information was so exact. It seemed so specifically targeted. Iran reportedly knew exactly which hotel Trump was staying in, down to the specific floor, and was aiming at the specific plane. So Iran apparently knew exactly which hotel he was in, and even the floor, potentially the floor, the room number. Faced with this information, security teams devised a secret plan just hours before Trump's scheduled departure. So because of this, security teams quickly created a secret plan only a few hours before Trump was supposed to leave. Trump publicly boarded the original Air Force One as usual, appearing in front of cameras as normal. So he got on the plane just like normal. He acted like everything was okay. He let them take pictures and video and ask questions, things like that. But he was then secretly transferred to a different military aircraft using a catering truck as cover without the knowledge of most of the traveling press or even some White House staff. So a catering truck came, catering being people that bring food to the airplane. So a catering truck came. Then they used it to move President Trump to another military vehicle. It looked like just bringing food and leave. But secretly, President Trump got on the truck. The original Air Force One then flew out of Turkey as a decoy, still carrying several senior officials on board, even though they were reportedly not told the full details of the threat. So the original plane still flew as a decoy, meaning they pretended he was on it. So if they fired a missile, it would still hit the plane. They're using it to distract the missile launcher. And the senior officials were not told exactly what was happening. Trump later confirmed the operation himself, telling reporters that the Secret Service and military asked him to switch to a different plane for his safety and that he agreed to their request. So President Trump later said, yeah, that happened. It all happened. Secret Service, which is my protective guards, and the military, the soldiers, asked me to go to another plane, and I agreed. Officials say the entire operation was one of the most complex security decisions of his presidency so far. So, government officials say this was really complicated security situation and security decision, and they had to make it to protect the president. And this is the biggest one so far. All right, how did you do? If you're good to go, you can go back and listen again, then come back here for This Week in History. Okay, we're going to come back to a little segment I like to do. I think it's interesting to look back at history. So we're going to look back at This Week in History, specifically 1976. One of the tensest moments of the Korean armistice took place at Panmunjom, inside the joint security area on the border between North and South Korea. On August 18th, North Korean soldiers attacked a group of American and South Korean soldiers who were trimming a poplar tree that was blocking the view between two guard posts. 2 American Army officers were killed in the attack using the very axes the work party had brought to trim the tree. The incident became known as the Axe Murder Incident, and it brought tensions on the peninsula to one of their highest points since the Korean War. In response, the United States carried out a massive show of force, sending B-52 bombers and aircraft carriers toward the region, and then cut down the tree entirely under heavy military protection. The incident ended with a rare event, an official apology from North Korean leader Kim Il-sung, expressing regret over what had happened. And I remember seeing the video of this situation before I came to Korea and was a little surprised. All right. Anyway, that's it for our digestible news today. What did you think? My first question, of course, is what do you think so far of the small changes I'm making to how it's presented? And also, I'm curious as to your thoughts on the sound quality. I know many of you have wanted different sound quality, so and I also want it, so I decided it was time for an upgrade. So let me know in the comments. I really like hearing that and like hearing what you guys think about what we're doing here at Corey Teacher. All right. Anyway, this has been our digestible news, your news in digestible English, our intermediate level English. And I've been Corey, your personal English teacher here on YouTube. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. About half of you are not actually subscribed. It's about 56%. So you can just join now. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps spread this learning method to multiple other people. And the more people we have here, the more we can learn and the more we can learn from each other. There's also a join button down below if you'd like to join. It can help support the channel so we can do more things like get better sound quality or try to set up something to look better in the future or have a better quality video, things like that. Yeah, I try to spend as much as I can on making this better for all of you, of course. And I appreciate it a lot. Anyway, if you also would like to leave a comment for anything else that's on your mind, please do so. I read them all, and I try to respond to most of them. However, this is an English language learning channel, not a news channel, so overly aggressive or politically loaded statements I tend not to respond to. But I will read them anyway because it is important to hear your grievances. And often if I make a mistake, I want to know. So please tell me. I of course don't like making mistakes, or rather, I don't mind making mistakes, but I want to fix them. All right. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week and this nice weekend. Hopefully it'll stay cooler in the upper 20s and lower 30s. And until next time, please just stay informed as best as you can. Keep studying. I'm here cheering for you. And above all, stay curious. Bye for now.